Long before there were pharmacies, there were healers. Mothers, fathers, and neighbors who turned to the earth for wellness. Welcome to the Reality of Herbal Therapy podcast with Jim Applegate. Each week we explore the plants, traditions, and time-honored remedies that connect us to that ancient wisdom, so you can bring it into your modern life.
So this week, I got a phone call from an older lady. She'd been severely constipated for a while and had used clean lax to clear everything out. And she was using Colser to rebuild everything. But ever since that severe constipation, she's been nauseous, bloated, cramping. Anytime she eats, it's really uncomfortable. Her stomach is just inflamed, and the Colser isn't working as well as it needed to. So she called and she's like, what else can I do? And I really had to think about it for a minute. You know, I'm so steeped in the capsules and everything. I really had to think of what else is there. And then it came to me, the Slippery Elm drink. If you're not familiar with the Slippery Elm drink, it's very soothing and is really helpful whenever there's any stomach issues. So I told her, do the Slippery Elm drink. And she's like, okay, well, how do I do that? So I had to email her the instructions to the Slippery Elm drink. And she's like, can I come and get Slippery Elm from you? And unfortunately, we're out of it right now. I get it in and I sell it fast. And it's because of a lot of people use it for Slippery Elm drink or for other things. So I didn't have Slippery Elm powder on hand. So she went to the health food store. So she called me like a couple hours later and she's like, okay, I went to the health food store. They don't have it in powder. So I just got it in capsules. So I just take the capsules. And that question brought up everything that I want to talk about here today. So let's kind of step back a bit. As you know, Dr. James started off making house calls and going to people's houses. And he would actually, after he would see somebody, he would find out what their needs were and what would help them. Then he would go out into his truck where he had all the different herbs. He would make them up little packet of tea that would last them for a week or 2 weeks until their next appointment. And he would give that to them simply because Dr. James wanted to have them have the freshest, most easiest ways to take it. Well, it didn't take very long, and Dr. James realized that didn't work. Basically, people would do teas for about a week. You know, you've got, like, the way he put it, sticks in the sink. You're always having to deal with the tea ball or you know, however you're making it. When it comes to making teas, there's a half-hour process. You know, you have to think, okay, let me get out the cup. Let me start boiling the water. And, you know, when Dr. James started back in 1980, they didn't have the fancy water kettles that we have nowadays where you just plug it in, hit the button, and it boils your water. You know, you had to get out the kettle and fill it up and then put it on the stove. And there was a real process to doing the teas, and there still is. So Dr. James realized teas didn't work. So he was like, okay, what are some of the options? He looked into the options. Tinctures, you could do tinctures. But Dr. James found out something really interesting with tinctures is, if you've ever noticed how somebody is when they're drunk, that's how your herbs are if they're made in alcohol. So there are tinctures that are useful and we use them, you know, like antispasm, for example. And there's other tinctures that we use quite often. Black and blue cohosh during labor for a woman. You know, those tinctures have their place, as so do teas. So Dr. James settled on capsules. Why capsules? Well, there are 3 reasons. First off, consistency. Basically, when Dr. James would give you your week's worth of herbs to make into your tea, you know, you would have to do it 2 to 3 times a day, and remembering to make your teas and, you know, have all the stuff out and the sticks in the sink and the little leaves everywhere and the mess and everything. In capsules, you can be consistent. You can say, I'm taking my capsules at 8 a.m. every day, and have an alarm set on your phone and the alarm goes off at 8 a.m. You go to your cupboard, wherever you keep your capsules, pull out 2 to 3 capsules, however many you're taking, get a glass of water, swallow them, and you're done. It makes consistency so much better. And because of that consistency, it becomes convenient. So having that consistency and convenience was really one of the big keys to doing it in capsules. Another thing, and a lot of people when they call, they're like, okay, how long do these last? They last a long time because we take the herbs and they're basically encased in gelatin. So it's like your capsules are wrapped, your herbs are wrapped, and so there's not much way for them to give off their essential oils or their vitamins and things that, so they actually last a really, really long time. So, you've got convenience and they last a long time. When you have herbs in a jar, if you have them sitting out in the sun, like just single herbs sitting in a jar in the sun, they'll actually deteriorate really, really fast. But like our bottles are dark amber, and the capsules protect those herbs, and so they last a really, really long time. Another thing that you can do, if you've ever gotten, like, say, the cough syrup from us, you'll notice that it's kind of like in layers, and there's little bits here, little bits there, and it's all different amounts. When it comes to capsules, we can be precise and know exactly what is in each capsule, and that's a really helpful as far as the dosage goes. So, when you look at all the pros and cons of the different ways to get your herbs down you, capsules become one of the easiest, the most convenient, they last the longest, and you always get the same amount. Like, so if Dr. James were to tell somebody who's suffering from arthritis, you need 12 arthritis a day, and arthritis is a good example because it's got roots, but it's also got leaves. To do that into a tea would take a lot of, you have to do the roots first and then add the leaves, and there's this whole process where in a capsule it's all there. You just take the capsule and you're done. So using capsules is good, but sometimes teas are better. So going back to the story of the lady that called me this week with the stomach problems, the reason I had suggested doing the Slippery Elm drink is because the whole point of the Slippery Elm drink is not to give you slippery elm. What it is that slippery elm, as you drink it, it coats the inside of your mouth, it coats your throat, it coats your esophagus, it coats your stomach, and it basically slowly coats everything. And once it coats it, that slippery elm becomes very soothing. It helps with inflamed or irritated tissues. So doing the slippery elm drink, like, you can take capsules and you'll have that slippery elm open up in the stomach. But like, she had all these stomach issues. So if her stomach's all inflamed and everything, she's not digesting correctly. And the capsules may not open up until later in her digestive tract. So you want to take that slippery elm drink and drink it because it soothes and it coats as it goes down. And that's the key reason why you want to do the slippery elm drink. So that's one example of when doing a tea or a drink or something like that is preferable to capsules. Another example is sage tea. When you have a really severe sore throat and your throat is really inflamed and sore, if you do a tea out of sage, as the sage passes over your throat, it basically calms down those inflamed tissues and makes it easy. And so doing that sage tea is really soothing to the throat, especially when it's inflamed and sore. And so taking Fection, which has a lot of sage in it, isn't going to do the same thing because the sage is going into your stomach and you have to wait for that capsule to open to get into the body, and it's not soothing anything. It's just it's feeding and nourishing the certain parts of the body. So that's real, so anytime you have anything in your mouth or your throat, upper digestive tract, a tea is usually better. Another time when the tea, like if you've got mouth sores, chamomile or red raspberry leaf, and drinking a tea of that will help with sores in the mouth. And taking a capsule, it'll help. It'll give nutrients, but it's not coating and soothing the inflamed tissue, and that's why you'd want to prefer a tea. Another example, and Dr. James always did this, which when I first married Lynn a long time ago, Flaherty, Walker, Elise, they were all very, very young. Like Flaherty was 6 months old when we got married. So Walker was a year and a half. And I remember one time Walker was sick and he was walking around with a bottle with some tea bags in it. And that was how they were helping Walker to get the herbs and nutrients he needed, was through the bottle. And so they give him a tea because, obviously a year and a half old can't swallow capsules. And I just remember him walking around with that bottle and just loving his tea. Another time when tea becomes better than capsules is when you need fast action. So an example of using capsules as opposed to, and it's not necessarily a tea, but if you do the liver flush, you basically mix the Epsom salt and water, and it's I don't like it. I really, bleh, it's gross. So I decided to put it in capsules. Well, we found that basically, because to do the liver flush, you have to do everything on time. And so if you're doing the capsules, you actually have to shift everything 15 to 20 minutes earlier when you're taking the capsules, the Epsom salt capsules, as opposed to the Epsom salt in the water, because it takes that extra 15, 20 minutes for the capsules to open and to get into the system. Whereas mixing the Epsom salt with water, it's instantly there. Same kind of thing. When you have, for a woman who is lactating, you want have her drink red clover tea, it actually needs to be hot for it to absorb quickly and to move that moisture into the body. Another example is peppermint tea for a fever. If you or somebody has a fever, you can take Throbbies, which has peppermint in it, and it's helpful and it'll help. But if you have hot peppermint tea, it actually warms up the body, which is the fever. The fever is a body's reaction to needing to warm up the body to kill off an infection or a virus or something. And drinking hot peppermint tea really, it increases the body temperature. It gets into you faster. So that's always, when you need it fast, basically a tea is faster. You can actually have a tea getting to the extremities faster than if you take a capsule. Then your stomach has to open up the capsule and everything like that. Nausea or cramps or stomach cramps, anything like that, doing a ginger tea will do night and day difference than just taking a couple of travel capsules, because the ginger tea is going to immediately start helping with those cramps or that nausea, whereas travel, it's going to take a half hour to 45 minutes. Like if you're traveling and like you're taking travel for car sickness, you actually want to take it an hour or two before you even get in the car so that it has time to open up and get into your body. Another time when you want to do teas is when your digestive system is kind of messed up. So like this lady, the reason I suggested the Slippery Elm tea or the Slippery Elm drink is because it soothes the stomach. Sometimes if the stomach is inflamed, capsules don't really open well, so they actually move into, out of the stomach and into the like small intestines before they even open up. So then you've got, those capsules, and they're not as effective that way. Whereas doing a tea, it's instantly there. You're soothing that stomach lining, you're soothing whatever's going on so that it can be absorbed. So how to decide when to take a capsule and when to do a tea? Well, so the things to look for is if it's a consistent thing, whether you're wanting to clean up your blood or clear out your lymphatics, rebuild tissue, rebuild broken bones, anything like that, you want a capsule for that. Anything that takes multiple herbs, like if you've got, like, we talked about arthritis and how you'd have to do your roots first and then your leaves, and there's all sorts of funky ways to make it happen and stuff. If you need several different kinds of herbs, it's better to have it in a capsule. If you're doing something consistency, like we talked about, every day at 8 o'clock, you need to take your herbs, then having that convenience of having it in a capsule is also very helpful. And then portability. I have, there was a lady came in once and she bought 120 capsules worth in 30s. She wanted 4 bottles. I was like, well, if you buy 120, it's a little cheaper. And she's like, yeah, but I love having these little bottles in my purse so I can have it with me wherever I go. Capsules are portable. A tea, you can't like walk up to a drinking fountain and hope that it's hot enough and make your tea or whatever. Dr. James and Veronica used to joke here in the summer in the Great Southwest, it gets hot. And so they'd leave a water bottle in the car and they're like, whew, that's not enough. You could make tea. But in the dead of winter, it's not portable. So capsules are systemic, something that's going on for a while, multiple herbs, consistency is important, and portability. So for a tea, when you want a tea, if anything that has to do with the mouth, the throat, the esophagus, the upper stomach, a tea is better because it will absorb and soothe those tissues first thing. A capsule, it has to basically a capsule goes in the stomach, has to dissolve, and then it has to go through everything, be absorbed into the blood and then taken through the blood and go, it's got this whole long thing. So if you need it to hit your throat, you want to do a tea. If you need it right now, a fever, like I said, you can take Throbies and it will help, but it's going to take a little while. A warm peppermint tea is going to help faster and get it into you a lot quicker. If you need something fast, do a tea. If you're giving it to somebody that can't swallow capsules, sometimes Lynn will open the capsules, mix it with the cough syrup, and then put it on a spoon and give it to the kids. That's kind of sort of a tea. But if it's a young child or somebody that has difficulty swallowing capsules, we have adults that can't swallow capsules. They've got throat problems or whatever, and in that case, a tea would probably be better. So you also want to do a tea if that herb is, so they use the word mucilaginous. What that means is like slippery elm is it helps bring mucus to the sore and inflamed areas, and it soothes it. It's really, and that's when you want to use a tea is if it's something that needs to coat. If it needs to coat something, do a tea like slippery elm drink or something like that. There's also some of the teas have the volatile essential oils, and so a capsule is a dried out herb, so those volatile essential oils are gone, and sometimes that's what you're wanting. So peppermint's a really good example. If you're using fresh or peppermint, when you make a tea, you can smell it. That's those volatile oils, and that's what you're wanting is the effect of those essential oils that are in that herb. And sometimes you need both. Going back to the lady that's taking the Colser to fix the digestive issue she had, she still needs the slippery elm drink to soothe everything and to help to make the Colser work better. And so, sometimes both is always good. So when the lady called about the slippery elm drink, the reason I remembered it was Veronica talking about how wonderfully soothing it is if you have somebody that's got a upset stomach and they can't keep anything down. More often than not, if you just give them a tablespoon of that slippery elm drink a little bit at a time, they can actually keep it down. It calms the stomach down and it makes it better. So, like herbs aren't magic. They're not some, there's not woo woo to herbs. The whole thing about herbs is they're a delivery system. They give your body the nutrients that your body needs to be healthy. So depending, however you're getting it down you is the whole point of getting those herbs in you so that they can start nourishing your body and helping your body to get back to that state of healthy and healing. So I'll put the Slippery Elm drink recipe in the show notes so you can find it. And there's also a couple other teas that I'll put in there, parsley tea, and so we talk about different teas because basically it's kind of they're a tag team thing, but sometimes you need a tea, sometimes you need a capsule. So if you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you, and we will talk to you next time.
You've been listening to the Reality of Herbal Therapy podcast with Jim Applegate. Visit drugfreehelpstore.com to download your free Healer in Every Home guidebook and explore herbal formulas that support your health naturally. Be sure to follow the podcast, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves natural living as much as you do. Thanks for joining us, and remember, true healing starts at home.
It is not the intent of professional herbal instruction or any persons associated therewith to diagnose or prescribe. The intent is only to offer herbal information for your consideration. In the event you use this information without your doctor's approval, you are prescribing for yourself, which is your God-given right. But professional herbal instruction or any persons associated herewith assume no responsibility. The claims and statements made on this podcast have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.